Hello, my name is Evan, and welcome to Economics 101, your number one source for everything economics. As we all know, the world is facing a lot of tension right now, and we have ongoing wars that are reshaping our global economy. But one question doesn't get talked about enough. What could war actually mean for the US dollar? For decades, the dollar has been the most powerful currency in the world. It dominates global trade, energy markets, and international finance. But wars, especially large wars, can change a lot of things between countries. In today's video, we're going to look at three things as they relate to war and the US dollar. But before we get into the video, please like, share, and subscribe. So the first thing we're going to talk about in the video is the dollar's dominance, its history of being dominant, and its current status as being the most dominant currency out of all currencies. Second, we're going to talk about how wars, trade conflicts, rising debt can put pressure on the dollar. And the last thing we'll talk about is what a weaker dollar could mean for everyday Americans like yourself and me. So let's go ahead and dive into the video. Like I say, let's start with something many people assume that the dollar will always be on top. A lot of people think that, the dollar is always going to be the number one reserve currency or basically on top. The US dollar didn't become the world's dominant currency by accident, okay? After World War II, the global financial system was largely built around the United States. Many countries began holding dollars as reserves, trading commodities in dollars, and relying on US financial markets. This created something economists call the reserve currency status. You may have heard the term because the dollar is used everywhere. Demand for it stays high. Okay, countries need dollars to buy energy, settle trade, and stabilize their own economies. So other countries need our dollars, or at least in the past they have needed our dollars. But here's the key point. This system runs on trust for the most part. Countries trust that the dollar will hold its value, that the US financial markets will stay stable, and that the political systems that we have in place will remain reliable. Wars can test that trust. All right. So when we have a large conflict, or when a large conflict happens, countries often rethink their alliances. Some governments start asking whether they should rely so heavily on a currency controlled by another nation. And that's where we start to see shifts. Okay. Some countries are experimenting with trading outside the dollar system. Others are diversifying their reserves away from U.S. Treasury bonds. Again, these changes are slow, but they show how global finance can evolve when things become unstable. Now, let's talk a little bit about war as it relates to sanctions and currency. All right. So war doesn't just happen on the battlefield. It also happens in our financial system. So sanctions are some of the most powerful tools countries use during conflicts. A lot of talk about tariffs, and we're going to get to tariffs in a later video, but today we're just focusing on sanctions, all right? When the United States imposes sanctions, it can basically block countries from using the dollar-based financial system. That's pretty powerful because so much global trade runs through the dollar, all right? But there's a side effect when we do apply sanctions. When other countries see how powerful these financial tools are, some begin looking for ways to reduce the dependency on the dollar. Other countries are like, I see what you're doing to this country. Let me find an alternative solution just in case y'all decide y'all want to do that to me. Let me not depend so much on the U.S. We're already seeing a lot of this. Some trade agreements are being settled in local currencies. Certain energy deals are being priced outside the dollar. And some central banks are continually increasing their reserves of other assets like gold, okay? At the same time, wars tend to increase government spending, especially military spending. That means governments often borrow more money to finance these conflicts. The United States already carries a massive national debt, and wars can add even more pressure to federal spending, all right? If deficits keep rising from global demand for U.S. debt slowly weakens, that can put a long-term pressure on the dollar's value. So the last thing we're going to talk about is what a weaker dollar could mean for the majority of Americans. If war and conflict eventually weaken the dollar, the biggest effect most people will notice is, of course, in their purchasing power. Excuse me. When a currency loses strength, it buys less in global markets. And because the United States imports so many goods, a weaker dollar can push prices even higher. That can show up in everyday life through higher gas prices, which you're seeing now, more expensive groceries, rising costs for electronics and imported goods or goods that we bring into the country, and more volatility in the financial markets. We're seeing a lot of this already. Pretty much everything that is happening right now is an example. War can also disrupt supply chains, energy production, and global trade routes, which can further increase prices. All right. So the bigger picture, what does all of this mean? First, the strength of the currency isn't just about economics. It's also about geopolitical and global trust. All right. Trust between nations. Second, wars and conflicts speed up financial change that might otherwise take decades or multiple decades. All right. And third, shifts in global monetary system can and will affect everyday life. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this means that the dollar is about to collapse. All right. At least not yet. But history shows the financial systems evolve, especially during times of conflict. Understanding these forces helps us to see where the global economy might be heading next. All right. So thank you for watching today. This is more of a shorter video that I just want to kind of break down and go over some things. We'll be talking more about the dollar as well as how the dollar reacts or relates to war. But if you found this breakdown helpful, please make sure you like the video and subscribe for more content on economics, global finance, and forces shaping the future of money. And I'd like to hear from you if you're viewing. Do you think global conflicts could weaken the dollar, or will it remain the world's dominant currency? Drop your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned to the next video. Thank you again.